I think I mentioned the Jupiter Symphony in my remarks. The conclusion to the Jupiter Symphony is the most amazing thing in music and in Mozart, and we're about to have the Jupiter Symphony of this colloquium. Even the secular humanists have hecklers in their crowds. I love it. I'm standing apart from the podium so you can see I have no notes. I mean, after all, I am writing a biography of the person whom I'm about to introduce, who of course needs no introduction at all. I'm going to say one thing. I love him very much. He is my friend, and he's going to speak now.
I want to tell you that last night I heard a voice that comes to me often. Generally around 3:24 in the morning. Sherwin. Well, no, that's Tilly. Wasn't your voice. I know who it is. He's been trying to get to me for 38 years. And he said he's been listening to the talks on the panel, and he wants to make a response. I said, you've never shown up, but we needed you, and quite frankly, I've given your spot to Harry Cook. Many people believe that I don't think God exists. I do, and he can join this temple as long as he pays his dues. One of the things I want to do right now is not easy because I have really enjoyed listening, as I know you all have. We've had an incredible panel of speakers, and through the whole process we've sort of gotten to know each other, and there's been a bonding in the panel, and there's a bonding in the audience, and all of us together, and that's one of the purposes of this colloquium, whatever conclusions you personally come to. We've been struggling with the word, and so I want to start out with a way of summing up what's been happening by talking about sometimes useless arguments. We often argue about a word, and if it's only an argument about a word or the use of a word, then this weekend is a waste of time. I mean, the argument about a word would say, well, spirituality is now fashionable. This group wasn't using it. Now they find it convenient to use it. And so they're using it. And should we use it or shouldn't we use it because it's politically convenient? But that's not worth a weekend. The issue is, for the people who want to use it, does it point to an experience that is real, that people who regard themselves as secular humanistic Jews are having? And no matter what you call that experience, should we acknowledge it? And is it an experience that hasn't been recognized enough by secular humanistic Judaism? I mean, that's the question. We're talking about the reality, whether you call it A, B, X, Z, spirituality, whatever, chassid, whatever word you want. The issue at hand is not a word. The issue at hand is an experience. Maybe, as it has been suggested, the experience indeed is airy and maybe not very substantial and maybe not very important. But maybe the experience is important. So we're not arguing about the word. That is, you may leave this weekend and say, I don't want to use the word. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me want to vomit. I get an almost nervous breakdown. I'm apoplectic when I hear the word. The purpose of this movement is not to give you a stroke. The issue is whether we leave this weekend acknowledging that people who use the word now, who don't even regard themselves as religious, may indeed be experiencing something that's real in their lives that they need acknowledgement for. And in fact, it may be an experience that everybody, even those people who hate the word, have. So I want to clarify the issue, all right, because we keep getting on this issue of the word. I don't care what people call it. This movement is open to what? All kinds of words, except you know. Now, I was listening very, very carefully to the people who were using the word to refer to an experience. And now we're focusing not on the word, right? We're focusing on the reality. We're focusing on the experience. Because otherwise we get caught up in old arguments that have been generated over 2 centuries, and there is such dramatic responses to these words that you can't get out of the argument about it. I mean, I heard Ruth talk about the importance in her life of connecting to her roots. She was raised with Brenner and Schlonsky, but she liked Bialik. And she was talking about something that's very important. Andre Asselman, in some way, talked about it as an experience. When you connect to your roots, for all practical purposes, you're connecting to your childhood. And there is no time in life more powerful than childhood. If your childhood was wonderful, you'll never forget it. If your childhood was terrible, you'll never forget it. And in fact, when we're infants, in the crib, on the bed, in our mother's arms or father's arms, and our brain is so impressionable, things happen to us that leave a lasting impression that will not happen when we listen maybe to similar input, the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Most of the things that are romantic to us are the things that come out of our childhood that nurtured us and took care of us. I mean, last night we had this whole skit about gefilte fish. Would I ever want to eat it? If it weren't something out of my childhood. So it's a very powerful time. And one of the reasons why you have to talk about it sometimes, as Andre did, by talking about smells is because when the experience occurs, we have not yet learned to talk. We don't have words at the time the experience happened for us to describe it. So we always say, well, this is, you know, because we are still infants. Before we spoke, trying to articulate. Norbert used an interesting word. You referred to spirituality as childlike. Did you use that? Mm-hmm. Right. I thought that was rather interesting. It's childlike. There is a childlike quality to whatever the experience is, and certainly one of the dimensions of the experience is that I want to be close to my roots. And my roots are my roots to my parents and my grandparents, whom I have personally known, and then they're extended to my ancestors. Now, I want to tell you about the power of parents. There is no power when you are a child greater than that of the parents. If they are good to us and loved us, wonderful. If they abused us, terrible. We both love them when we're very young, and we fear them. And in fact, they had an incredible power. Now, Dan spoke about spirituality as the power of enlightenment, as one of the things, the power, I awake. Joe, you talked about, used the word which has been used a lot, which is the word connection. I want to feel connected. I want to feel connected. And that connection is to the community, the world, the humanity to which I belong. I am a social being. Now, let me just talk about connections. Connecting to God is an interesting thing. Norbert spoke about it because he spoke about spirituality sometimes as the connection, or can be, a connection to an impersonal God, truth personified as God. But generally speaking, nobody wants a connection with anything from which they are not nurtured. Just being connected. Connect me to the sewer. I mean, the things we want to be connected to are the things that have some kind of power. I remember when Reconstructionism came into my purview in my teens, and I read Mordecai Kaplan, and then I read Kushner's book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, and he ends up, he wants to save the word God. He must save the word. You want to talk about the opportunistic use of a word. God is, I can't live with the word. So now what he does, he castrates God. So now you have a God that first he can't do anything. He can't rescue you from the Holocaust. He can't save your children from disease. He can't do anything. Historically, the reason why people wanted to be connected to God was that there is what? Some kind of power. If there's no power, if he's as powerless as you are, why would you want to be connected? So hang on to that word, power. Rachel Elior spoke about spirituality as the fantasy world that is a response to all the terrible problems we have when life fails for us. The pain and the suffering, so much a part of Jewish history. and what we would call the extreme form of spirituality, which is mysticism. But that in turn is also a search for some kind of nurturing power, just as the infant lying in the crib, helpless, now confronts these two omnipotent people called his parents or her parents, who can pick him up, wipe him, feed him, and if they don't show up, and you think you're abandoned and ready to die, I mean, what could be more terrible? So it's this connection to power. Now I have to talk about the origins of religion. If two things did not exist in the world, there would be no religion. One is suffering, and the other is death. If we got rid of both, do you understand? If we got rid of both, there would be no religion. And what religion starts out with is a desire to cope with what life provides, to frightening and terrible things, suffering and death. And the big question is always the heart of life. Where am I going to find the power? Where am I going to find the strength to cope with my suffering and with my death and with the death of others and the suffering of those who are close to me? How am I going to do it? And what emerged is an idea. It's the beginning of religion. Doesn't begin with gods. And it doesn't even begin with spirits. It begins, the Polynesians have a word for it, sometimes used in anthropology, called mana. Mana is magic power. It's something, by the way, that's why we love to listen to those fairy tales right now. It's filled with all that story of magic power. If only the world had magic power in it, we would defeat suffering and we would defeat death. When you have simply the magic power, it is like electricity and you can manipulate it. And there are people in the world who are experts in manipulating magic power, so they claim. We call that magic. But when you personify that power, when you turn it into spirits, and all spirits in some way start off as our parents and our ancestors, then you have religion, because the way you approach your parent or your ancestor is not through manipulation, because that isn't how you experience it. What you now do is you enter into the realm of prayer, worship, sacrifice, gift-giving, hoping to get the power. Now, there are two words that, strangely enough, never emerged in our discussion. They're all part of religion and spirituality. They're used all the time. Holy, sacred. People use it all the time. That thing is sacred. Sacred means untouchable. Well, when holy things and sacred things first emerged, the reason why they were untouchable was they were presumed to contain such power that if you came near them or what? Touched them, you could be destroyed. It was a power that could destroy you or heal you. And in every culture there appears the holy and the sacred. And often the holy and the sacred are attached to the procedures of our parents and our ancestors, because indeed they are presumed to be the most powerful people in our lives, and they have used this power to defeat death. They are still with us. They can help us and they can harm us. Now, magic power can come in two forms, or in two relationships. One is external. An external relationship is, I don't have any of the power power is coming where? From out there, and I have to access it. And the way I access the power generally is through prayer or through worship or whatever. I want that power to come into me, to cure me, to help me, to save me, whatever it is. And I have to be very careful how I access it because it's sacred. It's very dangerous. And therefore I better do all the steps just like a doctor in the hospital. I have to do the ritual well. Very, very careful. But there's also another experience in religion, and in fact, Norbert referred to it when he talked about the Hasid. The word Hasid was used in the Middle Ages to refer to miracle workers. They were people who didn't only receive the power from outside, they did receive the power from outside, but they were reservoirs of the power. They had the power within themselves. And in fact, if you came to them and they touched you, they could heal you. They were like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Women who couldn't get pregnant, but they went to Brooklyn to see him. Maybe he touched them, whatever. The power would pass from him from this reservoir. Well, there are, by the way, the Hasidim, the Rebbes, the Tzaddikim, the saints. They had the power, and it wasn't always the case, that they used this power for no personal gain. By the way, I've had two very profound experiences. Maybe it's part of what I call professional training. I was in Siberia, where I experienced a shaman who felt himself to be the reservoir of power, and he went through a series of exercises, and all of a sudden he was filled with, you want to call it the spirit, he was filled with the power. And now we have the power to travel thousands of miles to contact the spirits of the dead, wherever they were. And I encountered a voodoo priest in Ghana who did the same, went through an incredible ritual. I was trying to pick up ideas. Now, obviously, if you have a choice of the two positions, it's better to be in what? The one that's internal and not the one that's what? External. And in fact, religion becomes very bad for people from our humanistic perspective when they feel that they are empty of power, right? And that the power is always coming to them from out there. I'm always fascinated by Buddhism. Buddha said, what's the source of all evil? It's desire. How do you get rid of suffering? You got to get rid of desire. So, you start to say, I don't want this and I don't want that. So, but you can put it positively. I want not to desire. 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 It's endless. Never nervous breakdown. The only way to get rid of the I want is to get rid of I. So once you get rid of I, then your ego boundaries fade, and now you are part of the universe, where before you were powerless, you are now what? The universe. Immortal. Overwhelmingly powerless. Isn't that interesting? Now, if you want to make the crossover, and that's the issue, the word I want to use for the experience Because that's what people want and need from the very beginning. Rachel Elior said that, right? People feel an absence of power. They are desperate. That's why they turn to this fantasy world. So the word, which is not controversial, to describe the experience is empowerment. You can't have what we would call the traditional spirituality without feeling empowered. When you have empowerment, there's certain feelings you have. One of the ways to get empowerment is what happens when your ego boundaries go. Transcendence. You now identify with the whole universe. Serenity. Once you feel part of everything, once you feel you have the power that you don't have to worry, then you become serene. And the things that provide the power are the things that are beautiful to us. So you have a sense of beauty. So if you use empowerment, then you're in a what? You're in a neutral, right? Can people who grew up hating the word spiritual, can they say empower without getting a flower? The answer is yes. Now we're talking about the experience and not. The difference is the empowerment of traditional spirituality was with magic power. Now, magic power is a power that has two characteristics. One, you can't measure it. It's considered irreverent, blasphemy. How many units of God power are there in this room? And it is unlimited. No matter how much you use of it, what? The same amount is there. Unlimited, immeasurable. But what if in the age of science or whatever, you no longer believe in magic power? Now that's the issue. Got the issue? You no longer believe in magic power. Can you still be empowered? Drop the word spiritual, right? Can you still be empowered? The answer is yes. We live in a world of extraordinary natural power. And we can have experiences where we feel empowered, and they too can be divided into two kinds. External, internal. Well, external power, I wouldn't have grown up if I didn't have people who wiped me and loved me and nurtured me and took. Did I do it all by myself? I hear sometimes people, oh, I'm in charge of my life, I do it all by myself. I mean, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about connection. We're connected to people. Our connection to people is important because we need them. It isn't because it's an act of selflessness. We need them. We need other people. We need each other. Otherwise, we would never make it. And sometimes our reception of and being empowered comes from something broader, from nature. I want to tell you something about something that's very maligned. For me, it has great empowering force. It's called the Darwinian theory of evolution. I always found the biblical story in chapter 1 of Genesis to be, you want to call it anti-spiritual in that sense. Because it says, here are animals and there are people. They don't look like God, but we do. What I always about evolution, the reason I treasure it, is because for the first time, really, somebody developed, do you understand? An idea that connects all of, not separates, but connects all of life. In fact, the Darwinian theory of evolution enables me actually to transcend myself, to feel connected to what? Not just to people, but also to all living things that is perfectly natural. My roots lie in primates, the vertebrates, and the vertebrates, go all the way back. Several billions of years. I understand that. By the way, that experience of connection is empowering. So we have all these experiences. And in fact, the feelings that accompany the experience of empowerment are, in many cases, it's external transcendence, right? I'm part of something greater than myself. There are experiences sometimes of serenity, because when all of a sudden you don't feel the boundary you feel like part of a whole, then that sort of calms you down. And certainly beauty, because the things in nature that we call beautiful are the things that give life to us. Without water and without light, there would be no life. There is no mystery why light is often viewed as a sacred power. Light. Light! And in fact, we draw our sustenance from it, our life from it. It's beautiful. But you see, there's a great danger in only finding the power from outside. If you feel empty of power inside, and you're only drawing your power from other people, from nature, whatever, and you yourself feel disempowered, then you are in a terrible state. I mean, you can't have any sense of security about your life. I mean, you're desperate. If I lose my connection, it's like the power going off, the electric power going off. Where am I going to go? So what is secular humanistic Judaism about? It's about empowering. I mean, it's not about denying God. Sometimes, given his behavior, he needs a lesson in how to be empowered. It's about us. It's a positive message about us trying to find some power to deal with suffering and with death. And there's nobody in this room who at some time or other hasn't confronted either pain or suffering or death. So that's the problem. I mean, when Ruth talks about her ambivalence sometimes about words. See, what happens is you go from one extreme to the other. The one is abject humility. I'm nothing, I'm dust, I'm ashes, I can't do anything. I need all this power, I call you up, I can't take care of my life, I can't take care of myself. Come rescue me the way I've been taken care of as a baby. Come. The other is what I call this chutzpahdik self-affirmation. People will say to me, you know, Sherwin, I love myself. Just fell in love with yourself? I admire myself. I feel good about myself. Oh, thank you. I'm in charge of my life. I don't need anybody else. I have my conscious mind. I make decisions. Give me a break. We're all vulnerable, fragile beings. Do you understand? We need external power. We need that connection with people, with society, with the community, I mean, with life. We need that power, and we have to be able to access. So that's the problem. The problem isn't that you discard external power and now turn to making me feel very, very strong. It's a balancing act. All life is a balancing act. How do I have enough power in my reservoir so that I what? Can make decisions, take risks, confront whatever it is, and at the same time, I need help from other people. I do. Right? Give me your hand. And how much do I want of each of the? That's always the thing. And sometimes when people rebel, teenagers in particular, they feel what? They're getting. They feel this reservoir is empty, and there's too much out there, and they want to what? Restore the balance. And we're all doing that throughout our lives. It happens in marriages, human relations. So that's the balancing act. That's what secular humanistic Judaism is about. How, using the resources of the Jewish people and general wisdom, can we find the power within and without? Can people who both love and hate the word spirituality handle it? If that's the project, what? Yes! So now I want to conclude by sort of saying, what are the implications? Well, the implication, number one, is certainly that we have a choice from the very beginning. It's an option within this movement. So we'll stop the argument. If you want to call this empowerment spirituality, then what? Because don't you hate? Recognizing that obviously, given its history, it's very easy to slip from just talking about power into talking about magic. You've got to be very careful. Right? And it is true that sometimes people who tell you they're not interested in magic power are attracted to the word because they love the magic power. But you have to, yes. And if you don't, then talk about empowerment. We're talking about a reality. Not the word, and it's legitimate, if you want to use the word, because now in the last 30 to 40 years, as was pointed out, the word has taken on a common usage among people who are secular that refers to this experience, transcendence, beauty, serenity, connection, all empowering. So, got that? Got the option? We're both agreed on the agenda. We just got this option. The second thing is, implication is that if we live in a world without magic power, there is limited power. And therefore, everything we choose to do has risks of not making it. And every attempt to conquering suffering and to postponing death may not work. So what we need to live is called the life of courage. And circulating around North America these days and beyond is a story of a bar mitzvah that happened here on September 14th. Of a young man called Jackson Klein, who chose as his bar mitzvah hero a Holocaust survivor called Sali Ganor. And his bar mitzvah was scheduled for September the 14th. And the disaster occurred on September the 11th, and there was all this concern that celebrating a boy's bar mitzvah with this disaster would work. So the people came here. hoping to be comforted. How are we going to mix it? Well, I want to tell you that Jackson, who for all practical purposes was the rabbi of the service, did exactly what a secular humanistic Jew would do. With limited power, not with magic power, but with limited power. He talked about his hero, Sali Ganor. He talked about his courage in the face of almost overwhelming odds with no guarantees of success. Sali, in some way, felt empowered. That, by the way, empowered is, that's what courage is, empowerment, right? You are willing to take risks that otherwise other people cringe. They can't take the step. And when he took the step to do what he wanted to do, to rescue himself and even his family, he was afraid, but he did it, and having done it, the deed itself altered his feeling. So he spoke, as Jackson did, about Sali. And when he was finished, he gave the audience the message. He empowered them. We all arrived feeling helpless. And people said it was a spiritual experience. Why was it a spiritual experience? Because we felt empowered. At the end, people stood up and gave him a standing ovation. They felt empowered. And then he said that his hero was here, come from Israel. And the audience gasped when Sali Ganor came up. It was a transcendent moment. And then Sali, for the first time in his life, since he was 12, I was told, he broke down sobbing. Some young man had chosen him as his hero, and now this was this catharsis. He had held all these tears in. He started to sob. And then Jackson did the thing, which none of us who were there will forget. Because it's part of connecting. It's part of power. He took his hand and he placed it around this little kid, around Sali's shoulders to comfort him. You know, comforting is empowerment, right? All of a sudden you feel the strength and what? And the nurturing of another person. And sometimes when people who are naturalists and agnostics, atheists, whatever, even use the word spiritual, that's what they're talking about. That's what they're talking about, that kind of connecting. We need to establish a good connection with our roots. Our roots have the power to give us identity. That's what Ruth was talking about, right? You talked about Bialik and the difference between Bialik and Brenner. Bialik wanted to have a connection to the Jewish past, to the texts of the past. And in fact, having a connection to the past is an empowerment. It enriches your identity, who you are and what you are. We need to pursue the life of beauty. I have here, by the way, a poem. It's one of my favorite ones. It was written by one of the early poets, and his name was Schneur Zalman. And he traveled, he went through a lot of Eastern Europe, including Odessa, before he finally got to Israel. One of the things we need to do is to feel the things in the world, the beautiful things in the world that nurture us. Vayihi vihot aboker va'ani v'toch hasadeh. Once as it was morning and I was in the field was blazing with myriads of poppy bloom, and like congealed cries of desire they burst from the earth like lights of summer joys on stalks of festive green. Fiery tongues in the green, and the green is not consumed, and a morning wind blew rocking fiery tongues. And poppy flames shimmered in clear crystal air, but sparks did not escape, and no fine smoke. Then I pushed through and stood fast in the flame meadow's navel. Fire tongues circled me in galloping waves of fire, and on my head burned the sun, and at my feet flame blossoms, and like gold whited heat, I was purified in the crucible. This incredible brilliance and light to find the things in our life that give us light. We need, by the way, to affirm not only our past, but this is part of secular humanistic Judaism. It's empowering. Our ability to change what is unacceptable. That is also an empowering or a spiritual experience. One of the great poets for me of Israel, he belonged to the Brenner group. His name was Abraham Shlonsky. He ultimately made his way from Russia to Tel Aviv, and he wrote what for me is an empowering poem. He came to the land to help build the land, to build the cities. And in fact, he separated himself from a lot of the ritual, most of the ritual of the past. But he connected the two in an interesting way. Let me read this to you. Halbishini imak shera, dress me, good mother, in a splendid coat of many colors, and with dawn lead me to work. My land wraps in light like a talit, like a prayer shawl. My land is my talus. Houses stand like tefillin. Those are my tefillin. I build houses for people. Got it? That's what I do. And like bands of tefillin glide hand-laid asphalt roads. Thus a beautiful city offers her morning prayer to her creator, and among the creators, your son Abraham. This was done by people, poet, road builder in Israel, and toward evening at dusk, Father returns from his labors, and like prayer whispers with pleasure, a dear son of mine is Abraham, skin, sinew, and bones. Hallelujah, dress me, good mother, in a splendid coat of many colors, and at dawn lead me to work. Above all, we need to be able to find the power within ourselves and to find the power in our connection to other people. I have read many times, most of you have heard the poem, Roshi, Roshi, my head, right? By Yehuda Amichai, one of the great poets of Israel, maybe the greatest poet of modern Israel, and his message. When I'm in trouble, I do not say Elohim, God. I do not say Ima, Mama, childhood. I say Yadech, your. That's how I'm going to get through this thing. I need what? I need your hand. So let me conclude, because it's about empowerment, and again I want to say, that's what this colloquium is about. It's about identifying the experience that people are talking about, the experience that encompasses transcendence, beauty, serenity, spiritedness, vitality. It's that empowerment. And I want to conclude by reading you a poem from a contemporary Bialik, regarded by many people as his equal, if not his superior. His ideology was different. His name was Shaul Chernichovsky. We use every Israeli child sings Saki Saki, Ala Kolomot, Zuani Akolim Sak. Laugh, laugh at all my dreams, but this I, the dreamer, proclaim. In fact, Judy Goring translated that poem into a wonderful, wonderful translation, and we sing it all the time. But he wrote a poem, which I want to conclude with, because it's so important. It's called Omrim Yeshna Eretz. They say there is a country, a land that flows with sunlight. Where is that country? Where is that sunlight? Maybe there's some place out there, who knows, heaven, whatever. That's where I get my strength from. They say there is a country where 7 pillars are. There bloom on every hilltop 7 wandering stars. A land where is fulfilled all a man can hope. Everyone who enters, Akiba does approach. Shalom to you, Akiba. Peace be with you, Rabbi. Where are they, the holy, the powerful? Where are the men? Answers him Akiba. Says to him the Rebbe, all Israel is holy. You are the Maccabi. You are the one who have to what? You are the one who is empowered. You are the one to do it. You are the one to take responsibility for your life, to make your life good and the life of the world filled with justice. It's you. Choose your word. Empowerment, spirituality, Gesundheit. Thank you.